It's my focus. Okay, so we're gonna talk about different scope variables. So why don't y'all tell me if we had a variable in here, right? We had mileage. What does a car have? Let's talk about what attributes does a car have?
Color.
Color. Mileage.
Year.
Make. Model. Car type. Oops. Underscore.
What's it? Car type.
Car type like sedan, SUV, engine. Okay. Okay, that sounds sufficient, right? Oh, maybe VIN number. Okay, so quite a bit of things, right? Car holds a lot of information. So right now, if I wanted to create a new car, I have this new car down here, and I just want to put this is a, let's see, what would our sentence be? Color. Year. Mileage, miles on a engine. Okay. All right, so right now we just have this initialize method that is going to be run once we call new on the class, right? And create an instance, and then it's going to put out some information to us, right? So if we are running this, all right, so we got a problem here. Now let's look at this error. We know that it's in the review.rb. On line 2, we have, what's the error here? What type of error? It's an argument error, right? So we have the wrong number of arguments. So on, okay, so here's something to note, right? It's saying on line 2, it's trying to run initialize, but it can't because there's an argument error. And then if we look further down in the stack, it's saying it's coming from review line number 7 in new. Okay, so this is actually, when you get an error, it's actually going to give you a stack of what it tried to do and where it was referring to. So remember we were talking about declaration and invocation. Okay, so it was declared on line 2, right? We set some code to run called initialize, and we invoked it on line 7 when we called new on the car class. So when we called car class on line 7, it said, all right, I can do that because here on line 2, I know that when I create a new car, it's going to run this method, right? But from line 7, we're not giving it the information it needs to run. So what information would I need it to run? Who wants to give me their car? Let's see. Nobody? Nobody wants to give me their car? Okay, fine. Okay, let's see. So it's a what color?
It's a gray.
Gray. How many miles?
120,000.
All right. Oh wait, we might want that as a string, right? It's just 100. It's a number. Year? What year?
1990.
All right. And then we have make, which is, you said 4. And then the model is F-150. And then car type, what is that, truck? Diesel truck or car type, engine, what is that? V 5.4.
V8.
8. That doesn't look good. V, like mega V. Okay, and then, and VIN number will just be like, bloop, 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 bloop. That's your VIN number, okay? All right, so now that we gave it arguments, we should not have this error, right? Because we fulfilled the argument problem. Okay, so now this is a gray 1994 Ford F-150 with 120,000 miles on a 5.4 liter V8 engine.
What happens if you didn't get all the arguments that?
Good question. So let's say, you know, y'all gave me this information, but you were like, you know, like, I don't remember how many miles I ran or how many miles it ran, okay? And so that's all the information that you remember, right? I just remember I have a 1994 Ford F-150, okay? If I tried to run this right now, it will give me an error, right? Because it's going to say, hey, you gave me 6 arguments, I needed 8. Additionally, if I said, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I forgot. What was it? Gray. And then what was the other one we had? Mileage, right? Okay, I don't remember. It's like this many miles. Okay. So now we have a 1994 F-150 truck, 5.4 liter V8 with Ford miles on a gray engine. What? That doesn't make no sense, right? So the information that we put into our system right now is dependent on the order in which we put it in. And that's really frustrating because you might not, 1, get all the information you need, or 2, have the order memorized so that you remember to put it in the exact same way every time, right? So there's a way to update the way that you're pulling in information, and I'm going to show you that in a second. But before we do that, let's look at this information. If, for example, I wanted to, after initialize, I wanted to def, like, let's see, what's a method? I'll just have the method say, say hello, car. Okay, so let's say we had some kind of method that lets the car say hello to us. Okay, and then we want to, well, so what should we say? Puts the make, oh, color, make, model, says what up. Boom, boom. 2 O's. Okay, now, let's move this information back to where it was. We had gray at the front, so it says what it needs, right? And then this mileage was where? Color mileage. Okay, so now we're back here. This is the gray 1994 Ford F-150 with blah, blah, blah miles on the blah, blah, blah engine. Okay, so this is my driver code, right? I have C, my C car instance. That's interesting. And I want to ask C to invoke the method. We're telling C to say what's up to us by saying, say hello, car. Okay, what do we think is going to happen? Any guesses? Let's run it. All right, so first it did the initialize, right? And now we get another error. So it's saying, say hello, car, undefined local variable or method color. Now, we have color up here, but now that we tried to ask for color here, it's not working. Why do you think that is?
Variable.
It's a local variable, right? And it's local to where? Initialize. So we basically said, hey, here's all this information, and then do something with it. And then once we got to this end, vanishes. Okay, car at that point has no idea what any of that information is anymore. Okay, so unless we're actually saving that information to be accessible to more than just that method, we need to make it what scope variable. Well, we can start with the attribute, right? So we can start saying like, okay, well now I want to be able to read this information, right? Well, actually, let's start the other way around. So the first thing we can do is make it a instance variable, right? The first thing we can do is make it an instance variable. So if we wanted to make all of this information instance variable, in our initialize, we want to basically take all this information. Oh, that's going to be too much. So let's say I take all this information, and then, okay. And then what would I need to do here at the back to make it an instance variable? One @ symbol, right? So I say that. There we go. Equals, and then whatever that was. Did I do that? Oh, there's too many things. Okay. Color, image, make, year, model. Okay, so now that I have this information here, we've made this now accessible to the entire instance of the class, right? So if I wanted to access it here now, what would I have to do to change this to work? So we're having @ signs here, so we can refer to, wrong thing. Okay, so now that we added those 3 variables to refer to the instance variable that we have, once we run this method again, now we have it. The gray Ford F-150 says, "What up?" Vroom, vroom. Yeah. Okay, so we made all these variables that we're all the attributes we're bringing into this class, we made them accessible to the entire instance of the class. Okay, so now every time I make a new car, that car instance is going to be able to ask for its own information, or it's going to be able to have this information saved for them so that if I needed to make another method to ask for this information, it can do that. But what can I not do if I wanted to have information down here? Like, C, why don't you tell me your mileage right now? Right? If I wanted to call mileage and say like, hey car, tell me your mileage. Right? If I did that right now, I wouldn't be able to do that. Right? It's an undefined method at this point, right? Because we're using it in this format as a method. But let's say I wanted to have our class be able to tell any car, I want any given car to tell us, hey, what are your miles right now, right? What would I have to do to turn this into something that's accessible outside of the instance to be able to, for that car to be able to say it outside of a method? I need to make it a method, right? To be able to call that. And one way of doing that, as you mentioned, is saying adder reader, right? And remember, adder reader is basically replacing you from having to do def, mileage, and wrong thing. In here, now I have a method that I can use to ask a car for its mileage. And then once that method is run, when it's invoked, it goes and says, let me get the instance variable named mileage and return it to whoever is asking for it. Okay?
Even though the other mileage has an @ sign in front of it, you just set outside of the box.
Yes, this is giving people the ability to use these value attributes. These attributes are accessible inside of the instance, right? But they're not accessible outside. Like they're not able to. You're not able to like actually ask for that from the instance. It's information that the instance knows about for itself, but it can't tell you anything about it because you can't ask. Okay.
I thought you were saying that those were the same thing. So you have def mileage, at mileage, and at mileage equals mileage. Those are the same thing.
No, so this inside of the class, inside of your class, when you're defining stuff, you can ask for this variable anywhere inside of your class, right? Inside your class. And every time you make a new instance of that information that you set it here in initialize is going to be different. So if I, for example, I have C car, right? And then I want to make my car, which is car.new. I have a blue 2500 2014 Mazda 2 hatchback. I don't know, like V6 or something engine. I don't remember. Oh, I don't want to put engine. Just want to cover that in quotes. And then, I don't know, my VIN number, it's going to be something like blah, 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 blah.
So right now you don't need to have mileage initialized because you just called it outside of it using def. There's a reason having it initialized, right?
Wait, can you repeat your question?
So you just created something that says def mileage.
So up here,
Yeah, at mileage goes in, right? But
up here we created a method which technically should be further down, right? Because we haven't even defined mileage. So let's just do that real quick. Okay. So I made a method called mileage so that I can send a message, basically. That's what methods are. Basically, I'll be able to ask the car, can you tell me, instance, what your mileage is, right?
yeah, I get that. I'm just, so yesterday I thought you told me, so if you can scroll up, so see that it says at mileage equals mileage and initialize.
Yes.
So do you still need that even though you have something down there that says, scroll down, the def mileage, at mileage, and
When you do def mileage equals mileage, you're one, able to call it outside the class, and then two, because of this, you can refer to the method inside of here. So once we have, now that we have mileage here, okay, if I had asked for the mileage in year,
yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I understand it there.
so once I do that, I can remove this at symbol, right? So these don't have methods. So the method as a getter, method is called a getter, right? So it's just replacing, instead of me directly getting the variable, I'm telling the method to give me the variable. Okay, so that's the difference. So these, I'm directly inside of my instance going to get that method, going to get that variable and bringing it in. Whereas mileage, because I have one, I can say mileage. And then it actually runs this method, because it exists, goes and gets the variable and brings it back. That's the difference. Okay? So if I run this and I ask for k.mileage, now actually both of those things should work, right? Even though we didn't set it here as an adder reader, because we made this method, it's going to give us that information. engine. Oh, I didn't click it. There. Okay. All right, so now we know that we can access values by either making those methods or just shorthanding that into creating an adder reader. Okay, now what's the difference between an adder reader and an adder writer? Reader is going to allow us to be able to call it and get that information back, the variables, right? A writer is going to be able to let us change that information. Okay, and then accessor is both. Right, so out of these variables, which do you think should be readers and which should be writers? So what about car?
Readers, color, actually the only one that should be a writer is mileage.
Yeah, maybe that'll be better to do. So writer, mileage. So good question, or good point. You're saying that we should put mileage as a writer. Exactly. So down here, if I made mileage a writer, okay, then if I wanted to be here and I say, hey, Kara, your mileage now is now 0. You have a brand new car, right? So then when I print this out, it's going to say I have 0 miles on my car, right? And that in the car world is cheating. Right? We don't want our program to be able to allow for any given person to be like, here's all my cars, and now I'm going to make them 0, and now I'm going to sell them at like the highest rate possible, right?
So you could have mileage increase via some method, but that wouldn't require. That wouldn't
require a writer.
That would eliminate it.
Exactly. So you don't want an external force messing with your class at that point, right? You want to internally be able to change the rate of your mileage, which you can do internally with your instance variable, right? But externally, you don't want somebody to have access to changing that information, right? You can have them ask, hey, what's your mileage right now, right? But you don't want them to be able to say, hey, your mileage is 0 now. Okay, that's the difference that you're taking when you have an adder reader versus an adder writer. Okay, so mileage is probably not the best place to have writer, but guess what? What if I go to a body shop and I change the color of my car?
But don't you want that to be a method as well? You don't need to just be able to change it. You want to write a method for changing color, right?
Not necessarily. So you can, but mileage would be more like, it's more probable that you would take your car to a body shop program, right? To say like, here's my car, I want the car to be changed to red, right? And then they'd be able to say like, I ran this internal method that, like we don't know the specific steps a car body shop does to change a color of a car to red, but it's going to do it, and then it's going to be able to say, now car, you are red because I did all these steps, right? So I don't need to do that internally. A car doesn't know how to change its own color, right? But a body shop will know how to change the color if I give it access to my car. So in that case, you would want color, obviously, to be reader. I want to be able to ask the car, hey, what color are you, by the way, right? But I also want a body shop to be able to change the color of my car. So because of that, I would actually want that to be an adder accessor. Okay, but a only reading would be like something like mileage, where here I have color. Any other thoughts? Like year, I don't want somebody to automatically be like, your car is now 2017, right? You can't really do that to a car. So that would be something that would really only be accessible to read. Okay.
Instead of the processor, for the color, if you want to be able to show that, so you have to put if you don't want to.
There are all.
Yeah, but I mean, if you don't want to put processor for the color, you have to put both.
Yeah, if you didn't have accessor here, so let's say you didn't know the accessor existed, you'd have to put color here, and you'd have to put color here. Okay, and what that's doing is saying, I'm making a method to get it and a method to set it. So it's basically making two methods that you will have access to get or set these attributes. Okay. Okay, now, as you've probably noticed, like dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 attributes is really, really annoying. Am I right?
Yes.
It's really frustrating. Okay, so if I had to keep doing this every single time in the right order with the right number, you would get really, really frustrated. Okay, so the difference to pulling this information in as just like an order of information, we can use a hash. Okay, so a hash is something that you're able to modify your initialize method so that instead of dealing with all of this, you can just say car hash. Okay, so what we're doing is we're saying, instead of me giving you all the attributes directly, I'm just going to give you a hash. Okay, car model, car class, and then inside of my initialize, I'm going to refer to all of this information by the keys of that hash. Okay, so we know that anytime we have a hash, we can access anything in that hash by the key. We know that we'll be able to ask for it, whether if it's there, if it's not there, right? No matter what order we put it in, all we have to do is say, hey, give me the mileage, the value at mileage, right? The value at model. Okay, so we would change this down here, okay, to be car hash. Okay. Okay. So now we're saying that just look at the car hash and find the thing, find the key that's holding VIN num, and then replace that with the value. Okay. So if we go down here and let's say I don't have this, I moved this over here. Okay. But obviously, what would we need to do to change this information? We would need to make it a hash, right? So for that, okay, so I know that whenever I give information, I will be defining that information on. What is this? Oh. Formatting is my favorite. Okay, all right, so I know that if I make a hash, we'll just use the hash rockets because those are my favorite. Okay, and then at the end of those, we have a comma. Okay, so now I know I have right now model. This. Oh, no, that's color, right? Color. Make, thank you. Model. Car type. Engine. Year. VIN num. Okay. And then same thing for here. Okay, and then this one starts with mileage, year. What does that make? Oh, excuse me, goodness. Car type, engine, and
So how is this the same as 90?
well, so see the difference here, right, is that my car, I have mileage, I have car type, I have blah, blah, blah. Eventually, you'll be in a place where you're dealing with data that has like 20 attributes, right? Some might have 12 attributes, some might have 33 attributes, but you only need the pieces that you are building with your program, right? So although this is tedious to have changed this, now I know that no matter what I'm getting into my class, I can work with whatever is given to me in the order that it's like. It doesn't matter what order, it doesn't matter how many attributes. I'm not going to deal with my program blowing up because Kara forgot to give her VIN number to the car program, right? So if I run this, I should not see any problems with C.
The one below has the color blue.
Oh, none of these have comments?
We don't have the one. The blue is just hanging out by itself as well.
Oh, good point. Is that everything? So I believe we shouldn't have any problems. Let's see. Okay, I think all of these should be able to, instead of using the hash rocket, should be able to do that.
How about 22?
Oh. So let's test this out. There's a few ways to define hashes. I believe that might be, yeah. So either you can use a hash rocket like this, make is this, or you can do make. And then that's what's being referred here.
Strings?
The key.
Symbol thing, like I'm kind of fuzzy on.
Okay, let's make them. Okay, so let's make them strings. Okay. So I have one side and then other side. Mix them all strings, right? Okay, so what might come into play here. Now it went down to a C. Line 13 in initialize undefined local variable or method make. So now here, we've set these all as instance variables, right? So they're no longer local variables. Okay, so in this current space that we're doing all of this stuff here, for make specifically, we don't have an adder reader or an adder writer, right? So because we don't have an adder reader or writer, whereas in mileage and year and color we do, so that's why it was like, this is fine, this is fine. We get down to here, and it's like, I don't know where make is coming from. Do you actually mean the @make variable? Okay, so anything we didn't define up here, let's make this here so that it'll pass. Mileage is 1, and then engine is that one. Okay, so just for the purposes of us moving that forward, now we have, this is a blah, 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 with miles on a blah, blah, blah engine. And then now we have this blank stuff. So on line 34, it doesn't know what color is. I'm going to do that real quick. So let's deal with this first. So our sentences should say, based on what we ran, right, with C, this is a something, right? It should say, tell us something with certain miles on a blah, blah, blah engine, right? Now, we didn't get any errors, right? So that means it did go through this initialize process, okay? However, it didn't find anything with the symbol color. Okay, when we built our hash, we built it with a string. So instead of dealing with symbol like this, it looked at this and said that's not a symbol, so that's not valid. So when you're building your hash, build it like almost like a JSON object. So you have symbol color. So then we would have color. It's like that. Okay. And then we need to erase that. So let me just do that faster. Okay. Oh, that's the other piece. We didn't even give it an actual hash. We're doing it this. Okay, so obviously it needs to be in an actual hash, which is where you would use the curly braces, right? That makes it a hash, right? Okay, so now that we have our actual hash in here.
Is it gonna work? If you're gonna work like that, then you should
no, it can be whatever data type.
the color doesn't, okay.
No, the color is just saying this is an integer.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then this is what's called a symbol. So using like a hash object allows symbols to be the key. And then when you ask for it, you use the symbol on the other side, like you use the colon on the other side. And that shows that that is a symbol.
Can you still call the key as a string? Like in JavaScript, it's always string. Unless you use like documentation.
Let's find out. Let's use it like that. And make sure that gray is still there. It doesn't, not still there. So I think it's that the format, the whatever setup you would use for your hash, you would want to make sure that it's the same. That's typically how you'll see things set up.
Does it benefit of symbols over using strings?
I'll find out. I don't know right now, but we'll look at that up.
So I remember like an early example we were doing, it said like use a symbol in this case for some reason or something. Numbers. Oh, what it was?
String. We'll find it out. Okay. Yeah, so when it comes to keys, I'll find out details around like what the rules are around like what you can use as a key, but know that, I mean, they're typically going to be words, but like, right, because you would think about anything as like, I need to call it, right? I can't call a one. Not really. You can't really call one on something. Okay, so now we know how to init, like to refactor the work that we're doing when we're dealing with a large set of information, a lot of attributes inside of a class, okay? We've talked through the most used variable scopes. What are the other ones that we didn't mention? There's 3.
We have constants, which are all caps.
Mm-hmm.
Globals with the $sign.
Yep, global $sign.
And a class with a double at.
And a double at. So a class variable, double at, not really utilized very much.
Just be able to cross all classes.
Yes, so if, for example, I said, you know what? All the cars in my life are red, so I'm going to make this red no matter what. Okay? And then I moved the K stuff back going on here, right? So now I want my car to be put back in here. Let's make this hash, and then
when you use a hash, you have to put attribute, like, so we put, you feel like you have to put it off.
yeah, no, we don't, like, I can take off this stuff, right? I don't remember that, and I don't remember my VIN number. It's not important. Okay, so let's say I don't remember any of that stuff. I just remember whatever I can about my car, right? But this is all I have. Okay, so once I run this again, local variable. Oh, color. So if we're going to use the class attribute, we would put that in here, right? So you might think like, oh, it should be, like, oh, does it say undefined variable red? Is that what it was? Ah, so I don't have to change that. Okay, so it's actually red. That was the issue.
Did you want to put that in initialize, or would it just go in the class? If it's always going to be red for anything in the class, would it just be like, sitting on its own inside the class line, so then the initialize line? Or would you put it in initialize?
Let's find out. I think you would normally put in initialize. I don't think you would set it in here like that. So here, it didn't refer to either of them, but it didn't take that information. So even though I have color up here and I'm giving the car class my color, it's not recording that information. So, but if I, let's see if I just put color here. Even though I give it to, the class. Oh, I'm referring to it. I should rewrite it.
Down below, if you call it with at color, would it be red?
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll say like, I want it to be that.
And the outer reader writer is only working on instance variable, like red or color, as opposed to like the class variable.
Yeah. So obviously, you know, notes that's not really useful, right? For a car, like not all cars are going to be red. Okay. So we don't really need to hold on to a class variable, particularly with that. But the instances in which that might be useful, again, if we go back to yesterday's lesson, right, where we have the class ghost, okay, like, or I want to keep track of, like, if I'm if this is actually, I'm a car dealership and I want to know exactly how many cars have I put in my inventory as a whole. Every car is a part of my car class, right? And I have some kind of like instantiated number counter saying like, this is how many cars I've added to my inventory, right? Like, it's how many cars I've added to my list of cars, right? You can do that without dealing with the class variable. So it's better to do it not using a class variable. but that might be one instance where somebody might be like, oh, maybe I should save this number in this way, so that my car class thank you for that. My car instance might need to know that it's like car number 47 out of 5,083 or something like that, right? Like baseball cards sometimes are like, if I'm an artist, I have, I'm making like 200 art pieces, and this one instance is the 47th one that I've made. And I need to make sure that I keep that in mind or something like that. Okay. And you said last one, global variable, that is accessible in anywhere. So if I made like 4 different classes on this page, for example, where's my mouse? Okay, so if I made a car class and then I made, for example, class puppy, and I made class planet, okay, and somewhere in here I defined a, awesomest person. Okay, so if I made something here and I asked C for C.awesomest person, it would most likely, besides the fact that it was defined further down on the page. Oh, initialize. Oh, because I took it away. Sorry, I'm just gonna do that. Actually, remove color. Remove color because I erased the thing. Okay. It's just. So if this was defined at the beginning of the page, okay, has nothing to do with anything else. It's in its own class, okay? Interesting. Huh. With this example, it's not working the way I want it to. But a global variable is going to give it access everywhere. Now if I did it here. That's in hello car. Say hello car. Okay, so that's where that is coming into play. It's not useful to use. It's really dangerous to use. If I referred to this file anywhere else, that file would also have access to that variable, whereas any other variable, like in a smaller scope, would not have access, would not be in the other file. Okay, just do not use it, ever, ever, ever.
And then there's a situation that you instead variable, but
I'll clarify that in a little bit. I'll just make sure that y'all have the right definition. But there are definitely instances in which you would utilize self. Okay. Okay, so that's good for now for that.
Okay, so why are we doing this? What are we getting by creating this hash?
So the purpose of utilizing this car hash in this method or in this class, so when we create a class, instead of any instance having to be required to have both the number, the appropriate number, and the order in which you are giving it attributes, you can utilize a hash. So that's going to free you from the errors of not knowing the order that you made your variables. Because even if you had the right number, hashes are not ordered. Okay, and additionally, if you just don't have the thing, it's just going to be like, oh, I couldn't find it, so it's nil. Okay, it's going to, if this variable does not exist, or if this value does not exist when I'm creating this instance, it's not going to blow up on me, it's just going to set it as nil. Okay, which is great, because then if I just don't have all that information, then I can still continue forward with what I need to do, right? At some point, you would probably build errors, like the way that we built in the apple tree. We had a no apple error, right? There's some instances where you don't want to have nil quietly pervading through your systems, right? But when you initialize something, you don't want to have a problem. You want it to just initialize. Yeah, you want to be able to complete the creation process and then deal with the lack of information from there. Okay. So that's it for like scope review and this hash, like being able to like build a class using a hash, like bringing the data in as a hash. We're gonna talk about CSV and databases next. So I'm gonna stop the recording and then, yeah.
So those are the only two parts, the initialization you're dealing with the hash class.
So yeah, so the two times that you would, like step number one would be when you declare your class, right? When you declare your class, you're setting up your class to take in a hash for your attributes, okay? And then step two would be when you're invoking your class by creating an instance. So I'm saying like, I want to make a new version, a new instance of this class. Here is the hash information that I have right now. So when it gets initialized, it's just going to point to the pieces that you've given it and create that instance. Instead, when we had in the past, we had to list out all the attributes in the order we wanted them in, list them all out individually in our arguments, right? In our argument parentheses, we had to list out everything we wanted and then define them in every order we wanted inside of our initialize method. And then when we invoked that, we had to give our class the information in that order, and we had to give it the exact argument number that we expected our class to have. So that's really a barrier when you're starting to deal with larger sets of data that could be incomplete or out of order. Not fun. Cool. And hopefully that helped you also understand the difference between defining something, so saying declaratively, this is what I want to happen, or this is how I expect this to work, and then the difference being when you actually invoke something, saying, I want this instance to do this method. I want this instance to change this variable through this method and then return this information to me. Okay, it's the difference between declaring something and invoking something. Cool. All right, let's do break time.